3 fundraisers just today in Chicago and actually campaigning with Alexei Giannoulias.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that. Of course, while the president is here in Chicago, his senior advisor, David Axelrod, apparently holding down the fort there in Washington. He joins us live from the White House briefing room this morning. David, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you guys.
So let's start with the news. The federal judge striking down the ban on same-sex marriage that California voters passed in 2008. I think the American public could be forgiven if they are a little confused about where the president stands on all of this. He has said he opposes same-sex marriage. He has said during the campaign he didn't mind what California voters were trying to do, trying to ban Prop 8. Yesterday, though, the White House comes out and says, well, the president has spoken out against Prop 8 in the past. He said he would work to repeal the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, but the Justice Department, since he's been president, has actually litigated on behalf of that law. So let's just forget all of that in the past and ask you, where does the president stand today? Does he still oppose same-sex marriage?
Well, Savannah, let me just correct something in your rather lengthy litany of events there. The president opposed Proposition 8 at the time. He felt that it was divisive. He felt that it was mean-spirited, and he opposed it at the time. So we reiterated that position yesterday. The president does oppose same-sex marriage, but he supports equality for gay and lesbian couples and benefits and other issues, and that has been effectuated in federal agencies under his control. He supports civil unions, and that's been his position throughout. So nothing has changed.
But David, can I just say, I'm looking at an interview right here that Jake Tapper of ABC did back in June of 2008, where Tapper asks him, does it bother you what California's doing? And the president responds, no.
Well, Savannah, I'm at a loss here because I'm just sitting on a set, but I'd be happy to ship you the statements that the president made specifically on Proposition 8 and his opposition to it at the time. So, you know, you're working off of incomplete information there.
Well, how about, David, let's clear this up. Does the president support states trying to go their own way on same-sex marriage? Do you think it's appropriate for a state to ban it and appropriate for other states to decide it's okay?
Well, he does believe that marriage is an issue for the states, and he did oppose Proposition 8.
Okay.
So
all right.
That's been his position.
Okay, moving on. I want to go to tax cuts. I want to play something that the president said right after he signed pay-as-you-go legislation. Take a listen.
And it was the abandonment of this rule that allowed the previous administration and previous Congresses to pass massive tax cuts for the wealthy and create an expensive new drug program without paying for any of it.
Okay, very critical of the previous administration, previous Republican Congress for not paying for tax cuts. You guys are supporting keeping, I believe it's 98% of the so-called Bush tax cuts and extending them, but without paying for them. Why aren't you trying to figure out a way to pay for the extension of the tax cuts?
Well, Chuck, just one slight point there. We're talking about keeping the tax cuts for 98% of the American people. That's not 98% of the tax cuts.
Sir.
There's a $700 billion price tag associated with the other 2% for people who, as the president said throughout his campaign, don't need them and weren't even asking for them. And as you know, and as we all know, we didn't just walk into an economic crisis and a financial crisis, but also a fiscal crisis over the 10 years between 2000 and over the 8 years between 2000 and 2008 or 2001, 2009. You saw the $237 billion Clinton surplus turned into a $1.3 trillion deficit by the policies of the last administration. So we have a problem. We know we have a problem. We believe middle-class families cannot take a $2,000 tax increase at this time, but
no
we can't afford the other $700 billion.
But no pay-go on this one? Suspend pay-go?
This has been in the president's budget. We've got to work these issues through. But the last thing we should be doing right now is raising taxes on middle-class families, and the president has said that many times.
But let's talk about it, David, because, of course, the president has instituted these pay-as-you-go rules saying that federal expenditures should be offset by spending cuts, except for on big occasions. For example, the extension of unemployment insurance. You guys you cited emergency funding, and so that wasn't paid for. The big war funding, emergency supplemental, not paid for. The tax cuts Chuck mentioned. So you almost start to wonder, are the exceptions swallowing the rule here? How can people trust that the administration, Republicans and Democrats, are serious about deficit reduction when it really comes right down to it? The government continues to spend money without offsets to help with the deficit.
Well, first of all, these are, in fact, emergency expenditures, and they've always been treated as such, Savannah. We've had an economic emergency, and there are many people who've been caught up in it. Unemployment insurance most certainly fits under that category, and this is not a time to be placing additional burdens on the middle class. But in terms of the budget, understand that the president proposed that we hold expenditures for non-defense, non-security spending, for domestic discretionary spending, even for the next 3 years. The Congress has done even a little better than that. We have provided pay-fors for many of these initiatives, including the one that was passed yesterday to keep teachers from being laid off all over the country. That is a paid-for initiative. So we've been very serious about this, and beyond which, we were ready to support the commission that was proposed by the Republicans to deal with the deficit issue as a whole. They walked away from their own proposal. Now the president has impaneled his own commission, bipartisan commission, to do that. So we've brought a seriousness to this that frankly didn't exist over the last 8 years.
David, yesterday the president had his first ever one-on-one meeting as president with the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell. Robert Gibbs said yesterday there were some things that they wanted to talk about having to do with nominations, judicial nominations, other administration appointees. Did he extract any pledges from the Senator McConnell that you expect them to act upon in the next 48 hours?
Well, look, my understanding, obviously, was a meeting between the two of them, was that it was a constructive meeting, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we'll see what happens in the next 48 hours. We have, for example, a dozen judicial candidates who have gotten unanimous approval by the Senate Judiciary Committee and have languished in the Senate without a vote, and some for as long as 8 months. There's no reason that should be. So we want to see action on some of these appointees and issues that around which there should be no dispute. And obviously we're still interested in seeing some action on some help for America's small businesses, something we've been pushing on relentlessly for the last several weeks and meeting with great opposition.
David, I don't have to tell you about the persistent unemployment this country is facing, but you also know that medium and large-sized businesses, a lot of them are really raking in the profits right now, and yet they still will not hire. You're not seeing the private sector hiring that you want to see. I guess my question to you is, what's your diagnosis? The businesses say it's because everything's so uncertain, what with financial regulatory reform and the health care reform law. What do you think the real reason is? I assume you don't think that's the cause.
Well, look, I think there are a lot of factors that affect these decisions. We were on a pretty good scheme. There were problems in Europe with the finances in Greece. That affected worldwide markets, and you saw some retrenchment and caution that flowed from that. But look, we have to keep plugging away and give incentives to invest, encouragement to invest. The president's in Chicago today, in part to visit a Ford plant there, where we've seen 1,200 jobs added as partly because of the decisive action that he and the administration took last year when people were reading last rites over the American auto industry. Now they're producing fuel-efficient Ford Explorers that are going to be exported, 200,000 of them exported with some assistance from the federal government. These are the kinds of things we have to do to get our economy moving again, to get people working again. We're committed to doing it.
David, before we let you go, quick political question. Next Tuesday, Michael Bennet, appointed senator in Colorado, somebody the president's done a lot of campaigning for, including a teletown hall last minute the other night. What does it say about the president's influence with the Democratic Party if Michael Bennet doesn't win that primary?
Well, first of all, I think Michael Bennet will win the primary. Michael Bennet is a really quality person. He hasn't spent his whole life in politics and in a quest for public office, but he's been a public servant. He's helped turn around the Denver schools. He was a great administrator in the city government there, and he's someone who is and has turned around failing businesses. He's a very quality person, and I think he'll do very well there. But look, Chuck, our whole philosophy of politics is that politics begins at the grassroots, change from the bottom up, and so on. That's always what we said. Ultimately, people will make these decisions, and we will respect those decisions. All we can do is make the case, and we will. The president is very popular among Democrats in Colorado, but he also respects the right of Democrats in Colorado to make their own decisions. He thinks Michael Bennet is a great candidate.
All right. Senior advisor David Axelrod from the White House briefing room this morning. David, thank you.